Okay, hi everyone. It's Jenny Nash, and I'm here with Craig Gibb, and we're going to be doing this live Q&A about what to do when you're finished with a rough draft. So if you're coming into the room right now, welcome. And feel free to use the chat box to say hello and tell me who's here and well, I know so many of you, so but you can tell me where you're writing from. I always like, we have an Author Accelerator member, Christine, who lives in Mexico, and it's always fun to see her say Mexico City. So if you're coming into the room, let us know who you are and where you're from, and maybe also what stage you are in your own writing process, so we can get a sense of you know, how to tailor our conversation to where you are. Everybody will eventually be where Craig is when they've finished a manuscript and need to figure out what to do. So great. So I see Mary Ann is here from Virginia. Hi, Mary Ann. And we're happy that you're here. And looks like we've got a few people coming in. So it's kind of a strange time of night to be doing this. I know, 6 o'clock here in California. And where are you again in Canada, Craig?
I'm in Winnipeg, which is right in the middle geographically from east to west.
So, and it's late there. It's 8?
8 o'clock, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of a weird time. Probably people are putting their kids to bed and having dinner and all that. So it's just when this worked out. So hi, Steve from Asheville, and hi, Jenny, and Sherry from Florida. So Sherry's in the Story Genius workshop, and she has a completed manuscript. That's awesome. Great, thank you guys for chatting. So while we're doing our chat, feel free to type in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that and answering your questions. If we're raising questions or we're not answering them as we go, feel free to pipe in there, and I'll grab them and answer them. Okay, so hi, Salima from Los Angeles has finished the first draft of her memoir, and it's with 2 beta readers. Awesome. And hi, Sheila. Yeah, we're going to talk about beta readers for sure, so that's good. All right, so what's going to happen is we're going to just do, I'm going to do a little introduction just about what revision is about, and then we're going to turn to Craig's book and where he is. He's done a little self-assessment of his manuscript and how he feels it's doing, and then he's got some questions I'm going to answer. We'll go through, and then at the end we'll have time for specific questions from the participants here. So first, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the goal of revision, which seems like it's obvious, but it's actually not obvious, because one question that I hear a lot is, you know, how much revision do you really have to do before submitting to an agent? That's the traditional publishing path, is you submit to an agent, and the agent then takes your manuscript out to editors at a publishing house. And you know, how polished does it have to be to go out to an agent? And then the other path would be if you're self-publishing. So first, I'm going to take the how much revision do you have to do before going out to an agent? And the answer that I always give to my clients is it really has to be as perfect as you can make it. It really does. It didn't used to have to be that way. Back in the day, the agents and editors and publishing in general, I think, had more of an appetite for risk than they do now. And they would be able to identify a project that had promise or potential and help you along your way toward bringing that book to life. And that was, in fact, one of the big benefits of working with an agent and an editor, is that they did that for you. So you would be you know, given all the support and guidance as you brought your book you know, along. And that largely doesn't happen anymore. Sometimes it happens, every once in a while it happens, but for the most part it doesn't happen. And the agents, and then in turn the editors that they pitch to, are really expecting very, very polished work. It's been very shocking to me how little editing is being done at major publishing houses. That, you know, they want books that are really ready to roll. So how much revision are you going to do before submitting to agents? You know, how much are you going to invest in using an editor, in having beta readers use your work? Probably a lot if you want to be picked out. The agents just simply don't have the time or energy for something that's almost there or that has potential. So that's the answer to that path. In terms of if you're self-publishing, you're responsible for the finished product. It's all on you. It's all on your hands, and you obviously want it to be the best that it can be. There's a balance, of course, between, you know, you also want to get it out into the world. A book that sits on your desk for 5 years while you tinker with it is probably not going to do your career very much good. So you need to balance that with wanting to finish it and get it into the world with wanting it to be awesome and hook your readers. Particularly with the advent of ebooks, readers, you know, have most of the time they have the opportunity to read the first 2 or 3 chapters of your book for free. A lot of programs give them that. And if they're not hooked, they're just going to be done. So you've got to come in really strong with a really strong beginning and story and prove to your reader that you know you've got something that is worth reading. So you need to be prepared to do a lot of revision. So something that needs to be said about that is, well, there's a couple of things, but working with an editor along the way, the way that people do in Author Accelerator, is one of the ways that you can speed this process up, because you can end up with a draft that's really more like draft 5 or 6 rather than draft 1. That's the huge benefit. But it's usually not completely ready to roll, regardless, when you've got your complete rough draft. So I hope I answered those questions about sort of what we're even talking about here, what we're even doing. And we will be talking further down about how you make the decision about self-publishing versus traditional publishing. That's a very long and complex discussion. It's going to come up in this process a couple times. And if there's enough interest in that, we can do another program on just that in a couple months. I also have some, well, there's a course, an Author Accelerator course on navigating the path to publishing and with the new hybrid approaches, how that fits in and how you make the decision. So those things will all come up. So let's turn now, if there's no questions about that, to Craig and his book. So Craig, do you wanna? I'm gonna make you big on the screen here, so you can introduce yourself to us. We know you're from Canada. Hi.
Hello.
And do you want to just give us this little overview of what your book's about? And this is your first novel, right?
I've written other novels when I was younger. This is the first one that I'm hoping might actually be worth showing other people.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So yeah, why don't you tell us, you can either read this, your little blurb, or you can just tell us in your own words what your book is about.
Sure. I will read the blurb. So I'm going to flip tabs here. So if I blink out, I won't know.
That's okay.
Yeah, so it's a science fiction novel. It's tentatively titled Infinity Mind. So the blurb, as I've got it, which is admittedly not the best, but here we go. Mason is one of a small handful of people who are willing to stage nonviolent protests against the reigning dictatorial government of El Dorado, one of the oldest and most secluded colonies on Mars. When he's jailed for his actions and soon abducted for a top-secret government experiment, the faint glimmer of hope for freedom in El Dorado is extinguished. Several days later, Mason wakes up in a lab. He's been surgically given telepathic abilities and brainwashed to become an unwavering supporter of the government, effectively turning him into the biggest weapon the government wields in its efforts to keep its population suppressed. He answers to 2 people only, the president of El Dorado and her right-hand man, Odoya. The The mastermind behind this experimental project, Odoya, is a terrifying man on his own. With a past both dark and dangerous, he has his own motives for creating telepathic agents, motives that could have deadly consequences. For underneath the colony of El Dorado lie the tunnels dug during the foundation of the colony, and in these tunnels lies a millennia-old secret that is worth killing for.
All right, that's awesome. I just want to take a minute to thank you for being brave enough to come on here with your raw novel. That's awesome. It's very courageous of you. So that's kind of what your story is about and what you're dealing with. And you wrote a really great, when I asked you what you thought needed to be shored up in this book, what you were doing well and what you weren't doing well, you wrote a great self-assessment. And this is the first step, I think, to doing a good revision, is being really clear-headed about what you actually think of your own work. I think it's a mistake to turn too much to outside opinions. You need outside opinions at certain points, of course, but to start out with a really clear sense of what you think and what you believe, because the thing is, people often know if something isn't working right. They often, it's like, you know, people often tell doctors what's wrong with them. I think it's the same thing. I think writers know what's wrong with their books. So why don't you just run us through that little self-assessment that you did?
Sure. Switching tabs again. So there are 4 main points. The first one is that I really need to tighten up my novel. I originally had several viewpoint characters, I think like 5 or 6 originally. And halfway through writing, my editor and I decided it would be stronger if I dropped one of those characters. So I need to both touch up the other chapters, because there was important information in the chapters based on the character that I dropped. So that important information has to be moved elsewhere. And then I also need to tighten up the flow of the other viewpoint chapters so that the reader doesn't feel they're jumping around too much. I think that was one of my problems as well. It's just a lot of jumping from character to character. Mm-hmm. So that's number 1. Number 2, as recognized by my editor, Jenny, and myself, my editor is Kemlo, by the way, I really need to up the emotional and personal aspect of the POVs. Right now, it's a little bit too much action focused, and it seemed to be told from a bit of an emotional distance. I did rewrite a few chapters at Kemlo's request, and I did do a really good job of getting that emotional and personal connection. So it is something I know I can do. It's just I have to go and do it. And number 3, I think I managed to tell a fairly complex story fairly clearly, which is something I will improve. Like, because I think I'm pretty sure it's 4 viewpoint characters, and they all sort of have their own storyline that they follow, and it's all interconnected. So it would have been easy to get lost, but I think I managed to hold things together fairly well. And so the next step is to knit it together even stronger. Mm-hmm. And number 4, I have 5 things here. Okay, number 4, I think I also managed to effectively set up a series while leaving the reader satisfied that this novel is self-contained, because it is projected to be 3 to 5 books long. I haven't quite figured it all out. But I still wanted the first book to stand on its own, because nothing's worse than reading a book and then finding out you have to read the next one to find out what actually happened. And so with Kemlo's advisement, I'll be cutting some things from the end of this book and then shoving them into book number 2.
Okay.
And number 5, I feel that writing through Author Accelerator has helped me feel more confident about my desire to write. Until this program, I've always felt that writing was a hobby that shouldn't be taken too seriously. But now I feel I actually have something to share with the world. Sorry, my cat was about to walk on the computer. Yeah, so I feel I have something to share with the world. So it feels a little bit more like a legitimate thing rather than just a hobby.
Right, cat is my favorite. Okay, so I don't have a cat. So if I come on here, we won't see too much of the cat. So that's awesome, Craig. That's a great analysis, and I want to talk through some of those things. So first of all, I'm going to start with the last one. So you said that you feel confident and you feel that you actually could write something that Sherry says the cat's awesome. you could write something that you feel is worthy of sharing with the world. That is huge. So, you know, getting to the end of a rough draft is a giant accomplishment, and you should absolutely stop and congratulate yourself. It's something a lot of people never do. And you should feel a boost of confidence. You have done this awesome thing. So that is not insignificant. It's actually really big. So that's part of my advice is if you finished a rough draft, pat yourself on the back. I actually think I told John when he finished that he should celebrate, you know, like it's a very big deal. It's a big day. And, you know, it's what we at Author Accelerator want everybody to get to that day. So yay, you. And the other analysis that you did. So here's the thing to know about revision. And your analysis points this out really clearly. It's not one thing. It's not one thing. There's all these different things that you have to do. And it feels, when you're writing, everything that you're doing feels like it's part of the same process. It feels like it's, you know, you're writing, you're developing characters, you're creating a world, you're, you know, writing scenes, maybe you're doing some research, but it all feels like you're doing the same activity. And in revision, that ceases to be true. There's really different aspects to it that take different skills and different time and energy and muscle. And so we're going to be talking about how to break it apart and look at them in a different way. So I'm just going to see what, oh, Jenny, that's funny. She's talking about her reward is going to be a cat when she finishes. That's awesome. That would be like not a reward for me. Okay, so let's take some of these things that Craig's got. So one of the things you talked about was this POV character, point of view character thing. And whether or not you have one or more point of view characters, one of the things you want to do in revision is make sure that that voice of who's telling the story is really locked in and tight all the way through. So that's one discrete task that you would want to do, is to make sure that the person who's speaking, the narrator who's speaking, is always speaking to us in the same voice from the same point of time, that there's no continuity problems in terms of what they know when, you know, that piece is really shored up. I often recommend when you do revision that you go through a bunch of times only focusing on one thing. So in your case, Craig, you might do a read through, a revision all the way through, just on that one thing. You know, are there places where you need to change something because the POV character is different now, or you pulled out that other character? Are there places where there doesn't make sense that that person knows what they know? You know, I have a friend who works as a script supervisor for commercials and movies, and she sits on the set. That's her job. She sits there with a clipboard, and like if somebody has glasses on in one scene, she makes sure that they have glasses on in the next scene. Like somebody's job is that, which I think is awesome. And it's amazing how much they need that, and we need to do the same thing. So that's clear. So oh, Salima says her connection's cutting out. Sorry about that. Hopefully you can come back in and you can pick up in the recording. So the other thing that Craig talked about was the clarity, that he told this fairly complex story with a great deal of clarity, and that he wants to make sure that's even more true as he goes forward. That's another thing that you want to pay attention to for sure in your revision. And another word for this might be logic. The story logic. Is your plot logical? Are the things that happen logical, whether they're in a made-up world or not? Would the people actually do them? Does it make sense? Does it add up? Does it come to pass? You know, when we talk about holes in a story, so I don't know if probably everybody saw the new Star Wars movie, which I personally loved. I loved being in the theater. I loved the experience of it. I loved everything about it. But of course, as soon as we got home, my whole family went together, and my 23-year-old daughter is a massive Star Wars fan. She's watched everything a million times, you know, and she starts picking it apart, and you know, all of a sudden it's like, oh man, there were so many plot holes in that movie, just so many things that didn't make sense, that weren't explained, that were not logical, and you know, a lot of the feedback on that movie has in fact been about that there were huge assumptions made, and Star Wars can get away with that. You know, a franchise like that can get away with that. You and I can't get away with that. So we need to make sure that there's no plot holes, that there's logic, that everything makes sense and hangs together. And that's another read through of your manuscript that you want to do. You want to read it through and make sure that there's nothing, that there's no hole. Like, how did we get from here to there? Or that doesn't make any sense. That continuity, if you will. So, and then the other thing you talked about is massively huge, which is the emotional aspect, and how the action of this, you know, sort of sci-fi thriller is balanced with the emotional reality. And the truth is that even in an action thriller sci-fi book, the reader is paying attention to that emotional through line. That's what they are there for. That internal reality that is driving all the way through. What that character wants, what they fear, what their misbelief is that's going to be changed. So I haven't actually read Craig's book, but just based on the summary here, it sounds like this character, there's a main character who believes something about his own self and his non-violent philosophy of life, and he believes something about his government, and it sounds like it may be proven that he's wrong on both counts, that maybe he's not, as the non-violent way is not perhaps the way forward. Is that fair to say, Craig?
That is fair to say.
Okay, so that's the change we're going to see him make. He's going to come to believe something different than what he believes at the beginning, which is true in every single story. So we've got to find a way when you're doing the revision to make sure that, so the first thing I talked about was the point of view character is consistent throughout. They're speaking in the same voice. They know what they know at the logical time. We know where we are in time and space. Then the second thing I talked about was the logic of the plot itself. So we've got the logic of the voice, if you will, and the continuity, the logic of the plot. Well, now we're talking about the internal logic of the character. Are we always tracking what they're feeling? So this plays itself out literally in every single line of your story. There should be nothing on the page that is not tied to that character's emotional internal reality. Everything you choose to say, everything you choose to put in there needs to tie back to that. So, you know, the setting, if the guy looks out, I remember an early scene I read from your book, Craig, right when you joined, I think, where the character looks out on a weird sunset. That's what I remember, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that's been cut now, but yeah.
So something like that, like maybe that tells us something about the world on Mars or the world, you know, in this space world, but we want to know what it means to that person. Why are they looking at the sunset? Why do they care? What does it mean to them? What do they think when they look at that sunset? Anything that's on the page has got to be tied into that character's emotional reality. So it sounds like you learned how to do this a little bit better. And in your revision, it's going to want to be your main focus. Because you could, if you think about it, you could fix up this point of view character thing. You could fix up your plot logic thing. You could tell a complex story in a simple way. You know, you could do all of these things, but if you don't have something for the reader to hold on to and understand what this character wants and what it means to them, they're not going to turn the page. So we want to know what that character wants, what's in their way. We want to know what they fear. We want to know that misbelief. We want to know how it's going to turn. We want to know that every single step of the way. So that's going to be the main work of your revision. And it's amazing how conscious you have to be of this work when you're doing it. It's really easy to get in there and just go with the plot, like with your head. It's like, okay, this is the plot, this is what's happening. Oh yeah, that's that scene. This is what, you know, and you're reading through and you're whipping through, and all you're doing is following the surface level of what happens. You have to stop yourself and make yourself look at that internal logic. So one trick, I mean, we'll talk in a minute about how you actually are going to do the revision, but one trick that I teach is when you're revising, first of all, I totally recommend paper for revision, for printing it out and having paper. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One thing is it looks different on paper than it does on the screen. It's helpful to get you out of your head in terms of your creative, you know, when you created the work, you did it on the screen. Well, now you're doing a different task and you're doing it on paper. And you can also use the paper to track what you're doing. So I often teach that at the top of a chapter, you actually write down, what is this chapter supposed to be doing? What am I showing here on the inside of this character? Where on the giant arc of the change is this little arc fitting? You know, and then also what's gonna happen on the external side in this chapter, so that it's never random. It's never willy-nilly. You always know exactly what the intention of that chapter is. And then while you're working on it, you have that as a little touchstone. It's like, oh yeah, that's what's supposed to be going on here. And you should be able to, you know, if you have all your chapters stacked up and flip through and look at that statement on every one of them, you should be able to see that through line of the emotion all driving all the way through. So does that make sense, Craig, or have I lost you already?
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me.
Okay. Okay, good. So let me now look at your questions. So Craig asked me some questions, which are questions everybody asked, and I'm going to go through and answer those. Everybody asks, meaning we're all in the same boat when we finish a rough draft. So Craig finished his rough draft about a month ago. He took some time away from it so he could come back to it for fresh eyes. So I want to talk about just that for a minute, because that's really important. It's really important to take some time away from finishing your book to plunging into the revision, because you're in this creative mode, you're in this habit. If you've been doing the work consistently, it's, you know, become a part of your life, and you really want to kind of take a break from that so that you can let it percolate, and fresh eyes is a perfect description. Come back to it with, you know, a clean brain, and so you can see things in it that maybe you couldn't see when you were writing. A month is a perfect amount of time. I think that's a really great amount of time. So then Craig says, and now it seems I can't even bring myself to open the file. Okay, so this is like the psychologist on the couch kind of thing. So I'm gonna let you have the screen here, and can you tell us what you're feeling? Why can't you? What is it that you're feeling when you don't do it?
Well, there's a couple things going on. The first is that it's a huge task. Like, writing a book is a huge task, but then editing that book is also a huge task. So that's one. And the other is, I think it comes back to that thing in the self-assessment, like writing felt like a hobby. Now it feels like it's something a little bit more serious. But I think after having written the first draft and before jumping into the rewrites or the edits, I'm feeling like, do I really have something of value here? Do I really have something that I can share with other people? Am I really taking this seriously enough? Or like, how do I measure up to other people? So I've got all of those psychological things kind of telling me I'm not ready. I know I am ready to edit it and pursue traditional publication or self-publication, that's a later question. I think I am ready to actually begin that process, but I've still got that feeling like maybe I'm not good enough.
So those of you in the chat room, raise your hand by saying me too if you feel that ever, because my guess is every single person feels that ever, that they're not good enough. And so here's, you know, I mean, you said that beautifully actually, Craig, because here's the thing. If you don't open the file and you don't look at it, you can imagine in your head that you did a really good job, right? It's like it can live in your brain as a really good job. And you don't have to deal with the fact that maybe it's not good, or maybe it's not good enough, or maybe you were deluding yourself, or yeah, you actually suck after all. I mean, that's totally real. Marianne is piping in to say, Craig is touching on something I'm dealing with, the self-doubt during the huge job of revision, and Sheila too. I mean, it's totally real. And a lot of people get derailed by exactly this thing, because writing, the creative process is so fun, right? It's like you sit down and you're dreaming of this world and these people and the characters, and you get to know them, and they, you know, writers often say, and they talk to me, and I can see them. And I don't know about you guys, but I like being in the world of my book way better than in the real world sometimes, because I like the people in the book better than the people in the real world. And I also can control everything there. If I don't like something, you know, it's hard. And when you're, I mean, it's fun. When you're doing the revision, it's hard. So that's a really big difference, is that writing has this feeling of like, you're on a roller coaster, and it's just like, wee, and it's so fun, and I'm so great, and this is awesome, and it feels good to sit down and lose myself in the story, and all of that is really true. And then revision feels like, whoa, this is work. This is like, you know, what you said, Craig, is I want this to be good. I want people to like it. I now care about this. I have something at stake now. That's huge, and it takes a whole different mindset. And if the fact that you're even feeling that is, in my mind, a really good sign. And for all of you, that's true, because if you're not feeling that, if you're just like, oh yeah, I wrote my book, I kicked it out, and I'm going to kick out the revision, it's like you don't really have a stake in that. It doesn't mean anything to you. It's not valuable to you enough to feel that. And a lot of experts in the creative process say that feeling is a necessary feeling to move forward and do good work. So it stinks. It doesn't feel good, that doubt, and you know, but it's what it is. It's what you actually want. So what do we do about that? How do I, you said, do you have any tips for moving forward? And I do. So I think the very first thing is to recognize what you are feeling, and be honest about that, and be able to say what you just said, which is, I care about this. I made it, and I want it to be good, and I do care about that, and to own that, to claim that. And that's the first thing. I think it can be useful to imagine the worst possible thing. So, you know, let's think about that. So is the worst possible thing that you finish it and you do all this work and all this revision and put in all this time and effort and energy, and you publish it and you get horrible reviews? Or is the worst possible thing that you do all that and nobody buys it? So there's like that public embarrassment. Then there's like the private, like nobody bought it. Then there's, you know, or is the worst possible thing actually not finishing? Because for most of the people that I work with, most of the writers that I work with, the worst possible thing is if they never finish. So I don't know, Craig, what do you say about that? Like, I'm going to bring you back on here. What's the worst possible thing?
Oh, it's totally not finishing, because I'll let the listeners in on a slight secret. I do self-publish some erotica just as a way to make some money. And so I've I've received, you know, a ton of 1-star reviews, so I've already passed that hurdle. Like 1-star reviews hurt, but you get over them. And I've also had things that like they don't sell, and so what do you do when something doesn't sell? You just write something else and you move on. So I've kind of dealt with those things already. So the biggest thing is not finishing.
Right, right. It's the worst. So I think if, and you're right, you know, everybody who's published anything, it doesn't matter what genre, what topic, and, you know, has had to deal with public reaction and criticism. It's just what it is. It's just, you know, par for the course, and you find a way to deal with that, and you find a way to move on. But most people feel that not finishing is the worst thing that could happen. Skipper is saying that he often feels that he's a fool to spend so much time working on something that won't make any difference to anyone. So yeah, the thing to do with that is to think, well, what does that look like? Like, what does looking like something that won't make a difference to anyone actually mean? You know, having one reader who's moved by your book can be an incredibly moving experience. And I've worked with a lot of writers that haven't had a lot more than that, and that often can be enough. I think it helps to understand your goals and your motivations. So Steve is saying, I'm scared I won't live up to my own expectations for myself. I mean, totally. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I've written, published 7 books, and I actually thought every one of them was going to be a massive bestseller. I really did. I mean, I honestly really did. I thought I was never going to have to work again. I was going to make so much money. It was going to sell to the movies. I mean, I had every one of those fantasies for every one of my books. It's something that I want, and I try to face that about my own self, that I actually want to be famous. I do, and I would like to make a lot of money from my book. In the questionnaire that we ask at the beginning of Author Accelerator, we have that question about how do you see, like, what's I can't remember the phrasing, but it's basically how do you see yourself in a year, and then how do you see yourself in 5 years if you're, you know, have wild success. And I ask that on purpose because I think it really makes a big difference to face what you want and to face what your expectations are. And it's a really big part of writing. We do have these expectations, and we have these fantasies in our head about what's going to happen and how it's going to change our lives, and it's going to save us from having to do some dull drudgery work, or, you know, we're going to be recognized as this great. Okay, I'm going to share with you like my actual being famous fantasy. My being famous fantasy is I would be so famous that people would say to me all the time, Jenny, do not spend your time doing the dishes. A great creative mind like you should not spend her time doing the dishes. Go and sit and do your thinking and your work. Like, that's actually what I would like to that I would be, because I sometimes think, like, does Meryl Streep have to do the dishes? You know, like, I don't think so, unless she wants to do the dishes. So that's how I think, and it's ridiculous, but it's true. Sherry's saying that she has the same dream. It may sound weird to other people, but they aren't writers. Yeah, it's true. I don't think that we come to writing if we don't have some piece of wanting that. I mean, some people do. Some people write because they, you know, it feels good. That's what we were talking about before. It's fun. It's an escape, whatever. But when you start thinking about publishing and revising in order to be published, you're thinking about wanting to be revered in the world and have a claim and have people think that you're awesome. I'm actually working on Sherry, new dream to be so famous that we have a cook and a housekeeper. That's totally my dream. So I'm actually working on a blog post for Friday, so I don't want to give too much away about it, but it's about that idea of having instant acclaim, just instantly, and what that means and what that feels like. So, Craig, what you're facing when you're scared to open your file up is all of this stuff, all of it. It's not insignificant. It's really big. And you said it really well about you're now wanting this to come true. You want to be a writer. You want to be taken seriously. You would like to sell this book. You would like it to make you money so that you can keep doing it again. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's not just that I don't want to have to do the dishes. It's that I want people out there saying, when is your next book coming out? We can't wait. You know, I mean, so that I can do it again. So I don't think it's at all insignificant. And so, again, you ask for tips. So the tips are acknowledge why it's hard. Like, actually acknowledge why it's hard because it matters to you. And then try to really look at what would be the worst possible thing, and identify that, and then say to yourself, could I endure the worst possible thing? And if the worst possible thing is that you never finish this, and it's like, oh yeah, you run into someone on the street and they're like, oh yeah, Craig, weren't you writing that novel? Whatever happened with that? Did you ever finish that? And you, for the rest of your life, have to say, no, actually, I never did. You know, like, that's the worst, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I would just hold the worst thing in your head and use that as motivation, because you need something. Here's the thing. The doubt is not going to go away. It's just simply not going to go away. You're not going to ever be good enough that you have no doubt. I have a friend, it's Beth Kephart, who I'm going to be doing a memoir workshop with in March for Author Accelerator. She was a National Book Award nominee, and she has sat on the judging panel for that, you know, esteemed award. And she teaches in Ivy League at Penn, and she's around famous writers a lot. And she told me that the more famous a writer gets, the worse the doubt gets. It actually doesn't get any better. That they often think things like, well, that was the best book I've ever written. I'll never write again like that. Or, well, they gave me, you know, a ton of money and they're never going to give me another book deal. Or, you know, the doubt does not go away. And so you might as well, what I always say is pull a chair up at the table for the doubt and just let it be there. Let it get comfortable with it, because it's going to be there. And then just like acknowledge it, like, oh, there's the doubt. And then find a way to combat that. So that's that. If you picture the worst possible thing, you're going to get angry and you're going to say, I'm not going to let that happen. And I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do this work. Steve is saying the worst possible thing is an inability to improve. So yeah, right? I mean, like, it would be horrible where you just write and write and write and you never write something you're satisfied with, or you know, you feel is good enough. There's no guarantees in publishing. There's no guarantee that Craig's book is going to be any good. You don't know that until you do it. There's no guarantee about what's going to happen in the world. So much of publishing has to do with luck and timing, but you can control the fact that you can finish. You can control the fact, as Steve is saying, that you can get better. You can control all these things. And I can guarantee you that that's the deepest satisfaction, and actually doing the work and proving it to your own self. And yeah, it's awesome to hold your book in your hands. And I had a client actually today posting on Facebook. Her book's coming out from Scribner, and she was in New York for the first time, going to the Scribner offices in this iconic building with, you know, Scribner and Sons over the door, etched in stone. And she stood out there and took a picture and posted it on Facebook. I mean, that's a pretty great day. I'm not gonna lie, that's a great day. But finishing the book, I'm not kidding, is the best. That is the best day. I had, I can't remember which book it was of mine. My second book. Sorry, I couldn't remember. I got to go on the Rosie O'Donnell show, which was at the time a big national to-do. And that was a great day. They sent a car for me at my hotel in New York to go 4 blocks. My publicist insisted that I go have my nails done and my hair done. And I mean, that was a really fun day. I liked it a lot, but honestly, there's no day that's better than finishing. So I would just use that fuel of the worst possible thing to push you. Don't try to have the doubt go away. It's not going to go away. So if you recognize those things, you're going to open your file. You're going to face what's there. You know, all it is work. It's, you know, and it's not bad work. It's not like you're digging in ditches or anything, you know. So you open up your book, you're going to look at it, you're going to make your assessments, and you're going to do what you can to get better and to fix it. That's what you're going to do. I don't know if that helps, Craig. Does that help?
It does, yeah. It's just that affirmation that I just got to get it done, and that's the most important thing.
Totally, totally. I mean, and you can't get all that other stuff you want unless you finish, you know? It's like,
yeah.
What is it? Who said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take? I think it was it Wayne Gretzky? Was it a basketball player or something?
It sounds like a sports thing.
Oh, it's totally a sports thing. I just can't remember which sport it was. But you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. Same with writing. You're not going to be able to win any awards or make a lot of money or get a bunch of fans or hire a cook and a housekeeper and a footman if you don't finish the book. So you got to finish the book. Okay, so Craig's next question is that he said, do you have any suggestions for approaching a rewrite? I typically go from front to back and rewrite the whole thing, incorporating edits as I go. Sometimes I'll skim the document and address all the quick edits, then the harder ones, and then the difficult ones. Is there a strategy or approach that's better than the others? So this is a great question, Craig. And there's actually a bunch of things locked up in this. So what I was saying before, so going front to back, yeah, absolutely. So here's what I would do. I would read the whole thing all the way through in one sitting. So find a chunk of time, a Saturday, when you know what I'm going to do, sit down, print the thing out, and don't get up until you've read the whole thing through. Now you can read it super fast because you wrote it and you know what's there. You don't, it's, you know, it's really gonna take maybe 2, 3, 4 hours. The idea is you want to go fast and you want to get a sense of the whole sweep of it. So if there's a place and you're cruising through and you're turning pages and you're reading and you skip a bunch of pages because you're like, oh yeah, that happens there, that's probably a bad sign and you want to just be aware of it. If you're cruising along and you're like, I'm a little bit bored, when is this going to pick up? That's what your reader's going to be feeling too. Like you can get a really good sense of how it flows. And I would not, when you're doing this, stop and make extensive notes at all. You might make little check marks in the margin. You might have a little coding system, maybe like some of these that I have over here, fabulous little, you know, flaggy things that you might have, like put a pink one for a logic problem, like just slap it down and move on. But you don't want to spend a lot of time. You just want to get a sense of the whole. So that's the first thing that I would do. Then I would do what you did and make a self-assessment. What seems to be working? What doesn't work? What do you not love? What could be better? Get a handle on that. And then I would go through and do those one at a time. So like we talked about before, you're going to go through and look at your POV character. And you're going to go all the way through. That's all you're going to look at. You're not going to look at anything else. You're not going to look at your dialogue. Does your chapter end strongly? You know, you're going to just plow through that one thread and looking at that one thing and fixing that one thing. And it's hard. You have to have a lot of discipline because it's easy to get just caught back up in the flow of it. And you want to focus on that one thing. So I would do the POV character, then I would do the logic piece for you. So what I'm doing is suggesting is that you go in the order that's going to impact the story the most. So you start with the biggest problem and you come down. So you know, having a POV character that doesn't know what they need to know, or knows the wrong thing, or, you know, there's logic problems. That's a big problem. Having plot holes is a big problem. And what I would do when you go through these things is exactly what you described, actually. So there are small problems, there's medium problems, and there's big problems. So for each one of these read-throughs, I would fix the small problems. So you're reading through to do the POV analysis and tightening. If you see a little problem you can fix it for sure. So I often think of these as red light, yellow light, and green light problems. So I'm kind of, you know, I like my color thing. So like a green light problem, it's an easy little problem. Like you fix it, you're done. The yellow problem, the middle level problem, if it doesn't take too much time, yeah, you could fix that. If it's like, I gotta chop this page out, I gotta maybe chop this chapter out, those are kind of medium level problems, you could fix those. And then there's the red light problems, the big problems. And these are the problems that are gonna make you wanna put it away, put it back in the file, and not do it again. Because these are the problems that are gonna make you think, wow, I really do suck. Like, I can't believe I wrote that. I can't believe there's that plot hole. I can't believe that what this means is I have to chop out the first 3 chapters, or I have to move chapter 7 into chapter 2, or I have to take out an entire character or an entire thing that happens. Like, those are problems that feel insurmountable, and they're not. So what I suggest that you do is, okay, so let's take the POV problem. You might take, let's just say, a week or 2 weeks, depending on how much time you have to spend, just doing that read through and that problem and fixing those things. And what I would suggest that you do with the 3 levels is not, like I said, if it's fast and easy, you do it. If it takes a little bit of effort, you do it. If it's like, oh, this is going to be a big thing, what I suggest you do is you wait until you have the right energy to make that big change. Because sometimes you just need to be in the right zone to make it. And so instead of saying to yourself, oh my gosh, I have this big problem, you know, I have to do it now, or I have to do it never. What I say to myself is, I'm going to wait to solve this problem until, not like the planets are aligned correctly, but like until I have the right energy. And sometimes that energy might even be you're angry at somebody, and you're going to just use that to like tear this thing apart and put it back together. Or it might be you've got like a sudden, sometimes what happens to me, this is terrible, but it's true. Sometimes what happens to me is I have a super tightly booked calendar, and sometimes a client will cancel, which I don't like to say this very often because I don't really want people to cancel on me all the time, but I'll have this free chunk of time and I'll be so excited, and I'll take that chunk of time and I'll go solve one of those problems. You know, like I use that freedom or that energy or that excitement to solve that problem. So it's kind of managing your time and your energy while you're working through that revision. So what you're going to do is you're going to do this for every one of the problems that you identified, starting with the big ones, going to the middle, and going to the small, and then within each of those problems, you're going to be identifying, fixing small, medium, and large problems. And you're not going to finish the POV revision, for example, until you do all those top level red light problems. Then you're going to go down to the next thing that you know you need to work on. So I don't know if you can get a sense of this, but what you're not ever doing is making chapter 1 perfect and polished and working on the grammar and the words and how pretty it sounds, and then moving to chapter 2 and doing that. I think that's a mistake. That's often how we write, but what we want to do in the revision is look at it as a whole. It's now a whole thing. And what matters is the way that it flows, the whole thing. What matters is how chapter 2 goes into chapter 3 and leads to chapter 4, and then there's that cliffhanger, and then there's that question, and it's driving through. That's what matters. And if you go through and you do your revision like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, you might have great chapters, but they might not hang together and they might not be awesome. So I'm gonna stop talking and let you tell me if that makes any sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. In the past, when I've written novels, during the revision process, I would literally rewrite the book. I'd start at page 1. I'd have like a split screen going on. I'd start at page 1 and I'd rewrite what's on page 1, but like completely differently. But I would go literally from the very front to the very end. And I wouldn't do a lot of that jumping around unless I knew there was a continuity error that I needed to sort out, or some other thing like that. And I know John is working on his revision of Blood Dawn, and he had, because I have a printer at work, and we don't have one at home, he made me print out all of his POVs, and he broke his book into the actual POV section. So he made me print out all the chapters from one character, all the chapters from another character, and all the chapters from another character, which helps him look at the character's individual arc and how that character story flows, which you don't really see when you do complete front to back, because there's all these pages in between.
Right. No, I think it's really smart. That's really smart. And something else I want to say about that, this process is, while you're reading all the way through for one of these aspects, you're going to come up with things that you know you need to fix somewhere else. That's the benefit of doing these all the way through read-throughs. And you don't want to stop and start fussing with another problem. You could make a list of the problems. Like, let's say you're doing a POV read-through and you're finding some plot holes. You want to just make a list of the plot holes, put them over here, so that when you come to do the plot hole read-through, you've got that list there. And then maybe you're doing the plot hole read-through and you find problems with, I don't know, you mentioned the emotional balance. You might make a list of where those are, where you need to pay attention to those, or moments where you could really heighten that emotion, really drill down into that character. And then in the next read through, you might work on those. So going all the way through allows you to go back and forth, fix something here, fix it over here. The next time, working on it as a whole. So I don't know. Steve is asking, what if you're dealing with a book of short stories? So in that case, it depends if they're linked or not. Because if they're linked, you would treat it more like a novel, like what we've been talking about. That's also true if you're writing essays that are connected in nonfiction. But if you're writing very distinctive short stories or a nonfiction book with very distinctive chapters, you would want to do this for each individual story or chapter, so treating it as its own thing. I don't know if that helps, Steve, but that is what I would do. So I don't know if there's any questions about what we've been talking about, how to do this work. But it's largely a way to get out of your own head of creation and get into the head of, you're really judging the work now. You're really looking for the problems. You're really looking for the holes. Now, Craig has some questions about publication, but before we get there, I want to talk about the beta reader process. Somebody here on the call, I think, said that has a book out with beta readers. So what is a good time to bring in other people? That's a huge question. And I could spend all day talking about it because I see people make mistakes with this all the time. So I think that after you've got a rough draft and you've gone through a revision yourself and you have a really clear sense of what you know is good and what you are a little worried about, so that self-assessment piece of it is really important before you go out to other people, because you don't want to go out to other people hoping that they're going to make you feel good about your book or give you affirmation about it or tell you that you're okay. That's a recipe for disaster. best way to use outside readers is to reinforce what you already know about your book. So this is a super simple and small example, but um, the origin scene chapter that I wrote as an example for the Lisa Cron workshop was posted in that workshop today. And somebody said on Facebook that it made them cry. This is the second time I've had somebody tell me that, and I think I've only had or only known of maybe 6 people who wrote it. So it's like 2 out of 6 people said that it made them cry. And like, I love that. I deeply love that I made somebody cry. But I also knew that it was going to make people cry. That's what I wanted to have happen. That was what that whole scene was about. It's supposed to be really sad and really upsetting. And so when I heard that feedback, it wasn't like, oh, yay me, I'm so awesome, I made somebody cry. It was like, oh, yay me, what I thought I wanted to do, I did. And that's that, that's that deep satisfaction. So now the other thing that happens on the flip side is if you share something with somebody and you think you've gotten away with something. So usually you know when you have fudged something or tried to cheat or like, I'm not going to do that, nobody's going to notice, and then you give it to people to read and they do in fact notice. It's like, oh yeah, okay, they caught me. Like, there's the cat. It's so funny. The whole point of feedback is you're looking to reaffirm what you already know about your book. And if you get that feedback and you shouldn't be surprised. That's the whole point. So I suggest that you not give your manuscript out to anybody until you're clear enough that you know what's working and what's not. So that means that, first of all, things have to be working. You don't want to give a really rough draft to people and have them just say, this is a wreck. What good does that do? And you don't want to give it to people when it's so perfect that all they can say is, this is perfect. You want to find that middle ground to give it to them when they can help you make it perfect by reaffirming what you know to be true about it. So that's the when to give it to beta readers part. So let me just state that a different way. I suggest that you give your manuscript to beta readers when you still have time, effort, energy, and interest in making it better. You don't want to give it to them if they come back with feedback and you've got to do a bunch of work and you're thinking, oh, I can't. That's not helpful. Or if you're not going to change anything no matter what, don't give it to your beta readers. You want to seek feedback. You want to seek affirmation of how you've done and if what you intended worked. So I don't know if the people, I'm trying to see who it was who got it with beta readers, if that rings true for you, or if you have any questions of that. Oh, it's down here. Salima, let me know. The other thing about beta readers is who to give it to. And I also see writers make this mistake all day long. People tend to give their work to their friends or their spouses or partners or their mother. And those people are not usually writers. They're not often even creative people. And the result is often tragic. Because what you're wanting when you do that is that somebody pat me on the back, tell me I did good, tell me I'm not a failure response. And they don't usually know enough to say that. And they don't know enough to help you shore up what's wrong or fix the weaknesses. So you often get a response that disappoints you or hurts you. And so I recommend really strongly being very intentional about who you give the manuscript to and when. I'll give you some examples. I have a sister who is very smart. She has a PhD in music theory. She's a professor of music theory. She's very logical. She reads a ton. She's a scholar. And if I give her a manuscript, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, at any point, she will absolutely rip it to shreds, and with the logic part. and it'll make me cry, and I'll get mad, and I won't speak to her for a long time, and it's terrible. But there comes a point when that's precisely what I want. When I'm ready for it to go out to my agent, for example, I want somebody to rip it apart, because I would rather it come from my sister than I would it come from my agent. So I'll give it to my sister and I'll say, have at it, rip it to shreds. And at that point, I want what she can do, and I seek it out. So you have to be careful in that way of matching your need with the readers that you give it to. I also think it's really smart to find people who like your topic. You know, your mom might not like the kind of book that you write. That's fine. So to find people who read your genre, who like your genre, you know, it can be friends of friends is a really great way to go. Somebody who doesn't know you can be a really great way to go. If you have a topic in your book and you need someone to read it for topical logic, you know, like if you've got a doctor and you want to know if you're doctoring and the book looks good, or a detective or something, you know, try to find somebody who's got that expertise and is willing to look at that. And again, you're seeking what they have to offer. You're saying to them, can you find the places where I'm not doing this well? The feedback that just doesn't help at all is this stinks, or this is awesome. That, you know, you want specific feedback. So that's what I have to say about beta readers. And that brings us to the question about when and if to use an editor, and then we'll get to the questions about publication. So at what point would you want to go out to Skipper's saying, at what point do you think it's best to take it to your writer's critique group? So that's a good question, and that is the same question as the beta reader thing, and it depends on what your critique group is like. Some critique groups are so mean and nasty, and that's a problem, obviously, with the critique group, but you have to be really careful, because if you take something to them that's too fragile and they rip it apart, you're not going to feel great about yourself. And when something's fragile, you don't have that self-assessment piece we talked about. You don't know yourself if you like it, or if it's good, or if it's working. You're just like a little baby bird saying, don't hurt me. And then anything they say is going to hurt you. So I don't like people taking really fresh new work to writers groups. If your writers group is good at helping you identify what you don't think is working, like I think every writers group, I have very strong opinions about writers groups, and I actually have a piece that I wrote for Jane Friedman on her blog, which I can try to put up in the Facebook group. I'll make a note of that. I wrote about the danger of the writing groups. And so what was I saying? I was saying when you want to go to them. If you have a writing group that is good at helping you identify what's wrong. So what I was saying is every writing group, I think, should do like what Craig just did. The writer should come in. It shouldn't be actually about the writing almost at all. It should be about how the writer is feeling about the writing. It should be, this is what I'm doing well. This is what I've got worked out well. This is where I'm having trouble. I don't know if I've done this effectively. I'm not sure I've got this right. I'm worried that it's not strong enough. I'm worried that it's not coming across. The writer should come with their problem. And it shouldn't just be like, is it good? Do you guys like it? It should be, this is what I don't think is working. Could you read this and assess whether that's true? And just focus on that thing that the writer knows needs help. And then if the writers group can help the writer figure out what they should do to fix it, that's awesome. So then the writer could, they could brainstorm ideas how the writer could fix it, what needs to be done, what elements need to be fixed, and they can do that. So I don't know if that answered the question, Skipper. So okay, so the thing about the editor or a book coach, or when to go to an outside professional person with a revision or an edit, that follows the same pattern that I talked about with the beta readers. I think going well, there's two times when I think it's really smart. One is at the very beginning of a project when you're just trying to get the foundation of your book in place and what it's even going to be. I think that's the best time to seek professional help. And even a small amount of help at that time can yield enormous results. So in Author Accelerator, we start everybody with the book startup, which is a series of 6 or 8 weeks of really trying to get the foundation laid for that book. The Story Genius Workshop is just a version of that. And it's all about getting help right at the beginning when you really need it. If you can afford it, and again, the Author Accelerator program's whole thing is to be affordable. You know, obviously, it's in a perfect world, we would have help all the way through. Then in terms of getting a full manuscript read, I would make sure that you do your own revision first. You do everything that you can do first. You assess it, you figure out what it needs. Maybe you give it to some beta readers to measure your assessment. You know, is it working the way I think? Do they approach the reading of it the way I want them to? And shore everything up that you can. Do everything that you can. Then you can go to an editor. It's kind of like what I was talking about going to my sister. Because an editor is going to find the holes. That's their job. That's what they're trained to do. They're going to rip it apart a little bit. And if that's going to make you mad, if you're not going to want to do the work to improve it, that's going to be a waste of your time and money. You've got to go to that person when you're ready for it to be like you're ready to dig in and invest and make this the best that it's going to be. So that is, bye Sheila, thanks for coming. That is my quick thoughts on hiring an editor. How to pick a good one is probably for a longer conversation another time, but I always say word of mouth is the best way to find somebody good. You want your philosophy to align with theirs. You want to make sure that they like the way they think, the way that they approach things, how they're gonna come back at you. You might want to ask them to have a little sample edit to see how they work, that kind of thing. There's a lot of things to measure. One thing that's true is you can't get a degree in editing. You have to edit to be a good editor. And it takes a lot of training and a lot of practice. And at Author Accelerator, I oversee all the editors. I'm helping them and always helping them learn and grow. And that's so that they can become awesome. It's the way you become good. Okay, so I see that we've been over an hour, and I have to actually go in like 12 minutes. So I'm going to try to answer quickly these questions about publication, and if there is enough interest, we can do another one of these. It's just about that. So, okay, so I'm gonna bring you back on here. Craig, do you want to tell me? You're looking ahead to publication. You've got some questions about platform building, and then also some questions about self-publishing versus traditional. Do you want to talk about your thoughts about those things?
Sure. So starting with platform, every author needs a platform, and that's something I know. I also know the basics of how to build a platform. The big question for me is, when do I start? Because theoretically, if I will edit the novel, but editing and rewrite, that takes, so many months. And then if I get a traditional publishing contract, it might be another year before the book comes out. So when is the best time to actually start building a platform? And are there certain things that should happen at certain times? Like newsletters are really good, but if I don't have anything coming out for like a year and a half, is it a little too early to do a newsletter? So that's a platform thing. And then with the publication, like as I mentioned earlier, I do a lot of self-publishing of a genre that's best not mentioned in polite company. So I have a lot of experience with self-publishing. I know how to do it. And you get higher royalties on self-publishing, but you get a lot further reach with traditional publishing. because self-publishing is only online. Traditional publishing is online and in physical bookstores. And even if physical bookstores are sort of on the dying trend right now, they still are a very powerful force in selling books. And so it's sort of navigating that. And part of the problem is I write science fiction, and science fiction goes through booms and busts. And so when it hits a bust end of the cycle, like, publishers will just gut their science fiction publishing line. And so if I've started a series with the publisher and it goes through a bust and they decide to cut everything, as Simon and Schuster did back in, I think, the 90s, they just cut everything except the media tie-ins. And then I'm left with, I finished half a series with a publisher, and then who's going to buy the rest of the series, like, as a publisher? So some of the questions I'm thinking about.
Awesome. So yeah, there's definitely some interest in this topic. We can talk about it all day. We'll do some more webinars on it for sure. But super quickly, so the thing about platform is absolutely you should start yesterday. You just should. There is no author ever who gets to publication day and says, gee, I wish I hadn't have spent all that time building the platform. You really want to be doing it. You want to be doing it with as much focus and intention as you're doing the writing. So everybody groans and says, well, I don't have time. I have a job. I have kids. I have a dog. I have a cat. You know, there's no way. Well, you got to make a way. It's just part of what the work of a writer is. And traditional publishers expect it. If you're self-publishing, you have to do it. You have to find a way to connect with your reader, and you have to find a way to do it in a way that's authentic to you and that you know, serves you in your life and isn't a hassle and is fun. There are so many examples of authors who are doing this so well. I mean, Elizabeth Gilbert on Facebook is amazing. Paulo Coelho on Twitter is amazing. You know, certain writers' websites are phenomenal. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head who has just a phenomenal website. I'm thinking of Garth Stein, who wrote The Art of Racing in the Rain. He has an amazing website with so much on it connected to his books. So you need to find the thing that you love and find a way to connect with readers that you want to do. Like Elizabeth Gilbert says, she wakes up and the first thing she does every morning is check her Facebook page. And she loves it. And she loves connecting with her readers in this way. So you want to have it not be an onerous task of something you have to do, but part and parcel of what you do in your writing life. And you need to find that thing that is going to make you feel that way and not feel like a chore. So, you know, we could talk all day about that, so we probably shouldn't talk too much about it. But so Craig, you got to start now. And then the question of traditional or self-publishing is also obviously incredibly complex. And I mean, there's a couple of things that I want to respond to what you said. So you made the point that traditional publisher gives you a broader reach, and that may or may not be true. A lot of traditional publishers expect the writer to come in with the platform already in place. They expect you to already have that reach, and they're going to broaden it from there. But it's pretty unusual for them to build that for you. So going with a traditional publisher doesn't get you out of having to do the platform building. They expect it to. And I see a lot of agents rejecting proposals and manuscripts from my clients just purely on the basis of no platform. Every once in a while, you might have somebody take a risk on you or just fall in love with your book or what have you, but you need to do that work. So that was one sort of myth I wanted to dispel. And then the other thing you talked about, the danger of traditional publishers axing a certain genre or line, that's a really, I mean, to be honest, kind of a bizarre thing to worry about. It happens so infrequently. There are certainly trends and certain genres rise and fall. That's absolutely true. And Simon Schuster did what you talked about for sure, but it happens so infrequently. I don't think that's a thing to worry about. The thing to worry about is, look, because like if that were to happen and you were in the middle of the series and they somehow like axed their backlist or decided, you know, not to publish any more science fiction, and they end your contract, you have a ton of options. If you've got a good readership, you would just go out and self-publish the rest. Or you would, if you had a good readership, take it to another publisher who was doing that. So to me, that's not a big concern. The bigger concern is there's two main things. With traditional publishing, you give up control. You absolutely give up control. You don't get to pick your cover. You don't get to pick your price. You don't get to run discount programs whenever you want. You don't. You can't give away 3 chapters of your book if you feel like it. You're part of a team, and it's a team of professionals that has a way of doing things, and you are locked into doing them their way. The upside of that is you have a team of professionals and you're locked into doing it, and you don't have to do everything. They do everything. So pros and cons to having a team and giving up creative control. And then the money part, you pay for being part of that team. You're paying the professionals. You're just paying it by a reduced royalty that you would get on your book. So the benefits of traditional publishing are you get to work with a team of professionals who know what they're doing. They do have the ability to take a book to a broader audience if you've already started that process. It's great to have the legitimacy of being published by a major publisher. There's nothing that beats that. It feels really great. The benefits of self-publishing are speed. You can get to press much faster. You mentioned before, Craig, it can take at least a year, if not more, for a traditional publisher to bring a book out. So they're very slow. They just are. So if you've got anything topical or timely, you might want to think about topical, meaning like it's a headline right now, self-publishing. Self-publishing gives you 100% creative control, which is great. You get to make every decision. The problem with that is you have to make every decision. Self-publishing, certain genres are much more suited to it. Certain readers are eager for books that come out quickly, that come out as ebooks, that are, they can, a series that they can grab, and science fiction and fantasy are among those. There's also the hybrid options in the middle, which we don't have time to go into today, but those are some of the general things you want to think about. So Craig, you talked about, there's more respect and theoretical success by going the traditional publishing route. That is true. There is a respect factor, legitimacy factor that you cannot replicate with self-publishing. The only way to replicate it with self-publishing is if you become a mega best-selling author. If you publish with Random House and you sell 5,000 copies of your book, which is not very many, you still get to say you were published by Random House. They still picked you. You still have that. Whereas if you sell 5,000 copies self-publishing, that's all you've got, and it might not feel that great. So that is a factor for sure. There are a lot of writers who are published by traditional publishers and are not happy with what happened. They feel like they didn't get a lot of support. They didn't get a lot of money. They gave up creative control. There are parts about it that are not great. So it just depends on you, on your book, where you are, what you want. You've got to weigh all those things. I don't know if I answered some of that. So a little of that, maybe.
Yeah, and it helped dispel some of the myths, because I remember there was an author I really liked in the 90s, and I remember how his entire sci-fi line was axed when Simon & Schuster did that thing during the bust of the sci-fi. And so I didn't know how common that was, because I know Orbit, I think, recently decided to double the amount of science fiction they're putting out. And so if they're doubling, then at some point they might decide to cut it. And I think part of it is these are all little reasons in the back of my head that stop me from jumping into my revisions. I think that's part of it as well.
Interesting. Well, first you have to write a good book. That is true in every single situation. So I would say dig into the revisions, face those doubts, face your fears, and then start trying to figure out what the best way forward is for the book. Start trying to figure out how to build a platform. Jenny's asking, can I give an idea of what publishers look like numbers-wise for a newsletter? It varies. Or so newsletter would mean one kind of platform. You might have a blog, you might have Twitter following, you might have Facebook following, you might give in-person lectures, and it varies. I have seen publishers walk away from an author who have maybe a 5,000 person list, and I've seen them take authors that have that many. Much under that is going to be not helpful to you. I've seen some people say, don't like agents, don't come to me unless you have 100,000 followers. You know, so the range is really wide. But I have seen people turned away when they don't. They just have they have no plan for reaching their readers, no plan for connecting with them. They haven't done anything to be in the world that they want to be in, and that's true for fiction and nonfiction. But don't let that stop you. Don't be like, oh my gosh, now I'm never gonna do this. Sometimes agents will fall in love with the book and they'll pluck it out and it won't matter. None of that will matter at all. It just, the book will matter. There's hybrid publishing approaches that help you build that audience, that help you get the votes that you need to get over the hurdle that they will then publish you. There's collectives, there's all kinds of things that are alternatives. It's not as horrible as it seems. But I do have to wrap this up, and I want to do that by saying, again, first you've got to write a good book. And to write a good book, you got to finish your draft. So you did that, Craig. And then you've got to do the hard work of the revision. So try to overcome those doubts, not by making them go away, but by recognizing them. Understand what you really want and why you want it and what the worst thing would be. And then work to make that worst thing not happen. And I hope I gave you some ideas for how to approach it. And do you have any last questions? You got it, Craig?
No, I'm good.
I know it's kind of exhaustive. Well, if there's follow-up questions, we can take them on the Facebook page and we can do this another day. But I'm going to put you on the spot, Craig, and I'm going to check with you in a week and see if you've opened that file up and started doing it.
Sure. Sundays tend to be my work day for writing. So this Sunday, I'll make John make me.
We'll do it.
Okay. All right. So I'm
right here. He knows I said that.
I'm going to make myself a note. I'm going to post on Facebook so everybody will see if you didn't do it.
Okay.
Awesome. Skipper says, good night, big fuzzy cat. Thank you. You're welcome. And thanks, Jenny. I'm glad it was helpful, the red, yellow, green light. And Marianne, thank you. And everyone's thanking you, Craig. You were very brave and courageous to do this. And so we're gonna look for you to tell us you've gotten into your revision on Sunday. All right. Goodbye, big fuzzy cat, and goodbye, Craig.